Just June here. Today we thought we would help you with some thoughts on waking up your preemie loved one. So, what do you have to say about this, Jared?
So, you just woke up, you realized it's not the truth, you realize you don't want to do it anymore, but now usually your spouse or a loved one that's very close to you is still very committed to being a Jehovah's Witness. So now what do you do? It's very difficult. So that's what we want to talk about today.
That was the situation we found ourselves in. Jared and our kids woke up before me. And there's a whole long story to it. I don't know that we're going to go into the entire thing, but they definitely fully were awake, realized it was not the truth. They did not want it. And they decided to tell me that they did not want it. And I was a firm believer still. I was having minor doubts, but not enough to think I wanted to walk away from it. And they came forward and said, "Hey, we're not going to
Fun
meetings."
story.
And we thought we would explain how, what he did and what the kids did, and how they explained it to me, and how I processed it, and how it sort of played out. So maybe it would help some of you.
I think it's important, maybe not so much a how to, because honestly, the real answer to how do you wake up your spouse is you can't. You can't really wake anybody up. They have to be in a place where they're willing to entertain the thought that everything they believed, everything they were taught might not be true. They have to be kind of ready to take that jump, ready to look at things we were always all told never to look at. And until that point, there's not a lot you can do other than try to be loving, and that's what we'll go into. But we made a lot of mistakes. Well, when I say we, that's generous. It was me. It was mostly me. My kids were way better at this. I know it's their mom, but I think our kids were a little more detached from this than I was, because a marriage is different than a parent and child.
And they were instrumental in me getting to the point of being accepting of my of what I was doubting. I was doubting things when they all had come to the decision of waking up. But I will say I was not allowing myself to even realize I was doubting things. I don't know how else to word that. I was not like thinking to myself, I doubt this and I doubt that. That's not where my head was. But looking back, I can now see I was doubting things. I just wasn't letting myself have the freedom to think about it critically yet. And when they all said, "Yeah, see ya, we're not doing this anymore," my brain just shut down. Like I got immediately like, we need to go to meetings more. I need to go out in service. I need to pray harder. I mean, like, that was my immediate
Yeah.
reaction. I thought I need to do everything more. Like, and if I do it more, they're going to want to come back. That was,
Yeah.
and I didn't even like field service. But
Yeah, and I mean, the mistakes I made. So if you kind of try to think of it from my viewpoint, and if any of you are in this situation, this will be easy to imagine. Here, I've discovered everything I've discovered. Once you kind of give yourself the leeway to look into it, it doesn't take long to see through all of it, to deconstruct all of it. And that was June's experience too. Once she got there, it wasn't long to see through it all. But before that, we got there, I had done that. I see through it all. And now the person, outside of your kids, the person who's the most important to you in your life is still in it. So the thing you want the most, and the thing, it's like your mission, like, I have to get this person out. I have to get them free. And so what I did was the direct approach. I hit her with every argument. It was like apostate 101. All the arguments we all know and have read, and they're solid, they're sound arguments. But it didn't work. It does not work if the person has walls up. And as soon as your believing spouse hears from you that it's not the truth, or at the very least, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm not going to do this anymore, I can't do this anymore, that is the most defensive that person's ever going to be. Because now you're thinking, I need to save them from this, and they're thinking, I need to save him from this.
Satan.
From Satan. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. So let's take you back to not the entire thing, but I was coming home from rehab. So here I am already in a vulnerable state, and I had just got sober, and the first time, and here I am, and literally him and my 2 adult children say, we don't believe this is the truth, and we are not planning on going to the Kingdom Hall for meetings any longer. And they didn't go into why. Here's what they did well. They didn't go into a long spiel on why. They also made sure to reaffirm their love for me. And they told me that they would support me with whatever I wanted to do. And that if that meant that I wanted to serve Jehovah, if I wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness, that they were fine with that. So when they said that they really wanted to, support me in my in my service to Jehovah, that did make me like, well, okay, if you don't believe this, but you're going to support me. I was slightly confused. Like I felt like, okay, well, they love me and they're accepting of me, but if you don't believe it, why are you going to support me? Like I was mildly confused, but they at least weren't doing what the organization had said they would do, because the organization had basically made me feel like if this had ever happened, they would dump me, or they would basically tell me, like, you either pick us or pick them. And that's not what they did. They didn't make it an either or situation.
Now, I will say, though, if that's the route you go, you have to be doing that in good faith.
Yes.
You can't say, I'm going to support you, and if you decide you want to stay in this, it's not going to end our relationship. I'll always be here for you. If you say that, you better well mean it.
Yeah.
And I did. The thing is, we had about close to 25 years of marriage at that time behind us. And you basically have to decide if this doesn't go the way you want it to, meaning he or she does not ever wake up. They decide that, they're going to remain faithful Jehovah's Witnesses. They're going to pioneer. They're going to be an elder, whatever the case may be. You've got to decide if you're going to be able to live like that. Mm-hmm. My decision was, yes, I'll do the unbelieving mate thing. I will, I'll do what I have to do. I'm not going to go to too many meetings. I probably would have been dragged to a couple memorials here and there.
Which he did. Now he went.
Which I did. That was wild. But you have to decide whether or not you're willing to live that life. And if you're not willing to, do not tell that person you are, because then all you're doing at that point is confirming everything that the witnesses at the Kingdom Hall are telling them, which is this person's going to lie to you. This person is not going to accept you. So you really have to be careful there, I will say.
Yeah. And they were true to their word. I will say that as well. The one thing I will say, and I want to say this before I forget, is I was so afraid in the beginning when they laid this all on me, because my immediate thought was, even with my husband, who I had been married to for almost 25 years, and including dating and stuff, we had been together for almost 27 years. I felt like if he can stop loving Jehovah, who he had known for his entire life, he could stop loving him, could he stop loving me that easily? That's what immediately went through my head. And that scared me so badly. Like, will he stop loving me? If he stopped loving Jehovah,
Yeah.
is he going to stop loving me?
That's really important too, because if you, at the point I went to her to tell her I'm not doing this anymore, I had, it's major insecurity. Even with a long, fairly, reasonably healthy marriage, you still have this insecurity, like, is this going to blow up? But you have to realize they have the same insecurity you do on the other side. Like, okay, he's leaving everything our life has been. Does this mean he's leaving me too?
Exactly.
And that does happen where,
Right.
People, they say deuces to the marriage and all of it at the same time. But generally, those probably weren't strong marriages to begin with. I mean, who's to say? I can't judge.
Or maybe they got married. A lot of people got married for sex. Let's face it. And that was the only thing they got
Or
married
when
for.
they were 20.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
idiots.
wait, we were that. That was us. But anyways, we really sincerely loved one another, and I knew that. But I was so fearful.
It's
like,
still insecure though.
is this it? Is
Yeah.
this over? And so, fortunately, we've always been pretty good about communication, even when it's been sort of ugly. And so we didn't talk right away, but in time we started talking. And I think somewhere along the line, I brought up being, I think I tearfully brought up, are you going to stop loving me
Yeah.
like you stopped loving Jehovah? And I think he then realized how much insecurity I had, and it
We were
allowed
feeling
him,
the same thing.
to express that he was afraid I was going to continue on with my love for the religion and not my love for him. So we had the same thing happening here, but we didn't know how to say it to each other. And I think that's really important to come across here to people, is the insecurity that the Jehovah's Witness organization is banking on to happen.
I think that was so. I hate to use the witness terms, but like the whole get common ground with the householder bull crap. That was like the first place where like, okay, now we know that the relationship is not going away. So now you got a place to work from. So I think if you're gonna do this as like steps, that's probably the first step. You need to determine if you're willing to accept the relationship if they do or don't wake up, and if they're willing to accept you for not believing anymore. Right. And that's a tricky thing. There are people out there that just kind of go through the motions as a physically in, mentally out, and hope that their spouse wakes up along the way. I couldn't do it, but there's no wrong answers. I think there's, no judgment on how anybody decides to go forward. But I think you gotta, if you do put the line in the sand and plant the flag and say, I'm not doing it. The first thing is you got to determine if the relationship stays intact, then you got a place to build from. But again, if you say, I'm going to accept you if you stay in, and they decide to stay in, don't go back on that.
Right.
Then you are just the lying, mentally diseased apostate that they're telling your spouse that you are, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think the next step was that he, like he said, he stayed true to his word. He went to the very first meeting after I got out of rehab. He went back to that first meeting with me, and he was fully awake, did not want to be there. He didn't really make that known to me, but I know that now.
Yeah, it was tough.
And, he was supportive. He talked to everyone, and he had a beard, and that was before beards were allowed. So, but he was very kind. And then he let me know that he really didn't want to go to many meetings, but that if I needed his support occasionally, he would go. But he made it clear he didn't want to go to meetings on a regular basis.
I'm not doing this for you. Not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you. 100%. Right.
And he said, like, if we can keep it to a minimum, he's like, if it like once a month at most. And he made it clear again, like, and I'm only going there to make you happy. If it were up to me, I would never walk into a Kingdom Hall again. And he wasn't nasty about it. He just stated
kind
it.
Of matter of fact.
This is just what it is.
Now, I was lucky because our son kind of filled the gap on that. I actually only I went to a meeting at the end of October in 2018. I went to the memorial in 2019, and that was it. But our son went to a few along the way.
And I was just going to say that my son, in the meantime, who, was in his 20s and an adult, they all talked to me together, and he said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm also not interested. I don't want this, but I will go with you to meetings occasionally." They all made it very clear they were doing this for me, and it had nothing to do with wanting to be there. My daughter was the only one that was like, "Yeah,
No.
I'm out. Can't do it. Sorry. Love
She's
you."
the smartest of all.
Yeah,
of us.
she was like, "I just can't." And that was fine. I had support from the guys, and she was in a different place, and she was the youngest out of everyone, and her circumstances were different. So I understood. The other thing that I'll say is my son was so important in my waking up process, because when he would go to the meetings with me, he would go, and he's just very easygoing. He's Mr. Party and talkative, and everyone loves him, and he's just the life of the party at all times. So when he would go, everyone would be like, "Hey, Thomas, so great to see you," and love bomb him, of course, because he hadn't been there in quite some time. And I, in my mind, as a very preemie person, was thinking, "See, this is going to make him want to come back." And so at the end of the meeting, we would be driving home, and I would be like, "Wasn't that wonderful?" And he was like, "No." And I'd be like, "What do you mean no? Everyone was talking to you." He's like, "Oh, it's nice to see people, but no." And I would be like, "But didn't you miss so-and-so and this and that?" And he's like, "Mom, yes, I miss the people. They are all lovely. But the message that was being told and everything else about it, no."
And to be clear, we still miss a lot of the people.
And I was like, "Well, what do you mean the message? Like, I mean, it was just about the news system and this and that." And he would say, "Mom, we've already tried talking to you a little bit, but you don't want to hear, and that's fine." He's like, "But no," he says, "honestly, it was torture to sit through that meeting." And I would be sort of like, like offended, like irritated with him for even saying that it was that way.
So encouraging.
Because I thought it was so encouraging. But he wouldn't push it. He would just say that much. And at first, I just left it alone because it irritated me. And I would just be like, "Well, fine." And I wouldn't talk about it any further, and I wouldn't ask him any other questions. And I would just sort of pout to myself about the whole thing, quite honestly. And that was that. I let it go, but he would go with me. And, I was torn about the whole thing. Like, why does he keep going, but then he hates it? Like, I don't understand.
He was probably going every 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, so he was going on a pretty regular basis.
This is probably a good time to talk about how instrumental he was because of the mistakes I was making. Because this is like, so what we were talking about before, if you decide you're going to draw the line in the sand and plant your flag and say, "I don't believe anymore." So now mission number 1 is, of course, got to get him out. Got to get him out. Got to get him out. And that was where I was. I think it's human nature. And I did not do a good job fighting human nature in this one, because for the first probably week and a half, I just went with frontal attack. Every argument, like we said, and it just made things so much worse. To the point where I remember we would have conversations and I would start to bring up something that in a roundabout way I was going to later like say, "See," and she got so adept at sniffing it out and being like, "I know what you're doing. Just knock it off." Like, and finally, about a week and a half or 2 in, my son took me aside, and by that time, our relationship was so different in that our relationship now is completely open. Like, I'm still his dad, but he will check me on stuff and vice versa. And, I love that about our relationship. But he took me aside and it was literally, dude, what are you doing? You're screwing up. And he was right. And I don't know if she would have woke up if not for Thomas. So I backed off completely. And I, for a while, it was just, maybe for another week or two, it was just, we kind of went to our corners and we just didn't talk about it at all. And I just let her do her thing. He would go with her occasionally. And then,
It was longer than a week or two. It was
yeah,
months.
maybe. No, I mean a week or two, and then you started getting curious.
Oh
It
yeah.
started to kind of, I think it started to gnaw at her like, okay, well, why aren't we arguing about this? Why isn't he giving me any reasons? And so she started then coming to me. And that was kind of the beginning of the end as far as her indoctrination goes.
Yeah, because I guess in the beginning I didn't ask really why. I guess I sort of asked like, what do you why don't you want this? And they sort of, I think, tried to give me an answer. I can't remember
I went
exactly.
doctrinal, and
Yeah, and
that might work for some people, but
yeah.
for her,
I'm
that
all
was
about the touchy-feely love, brotherly
if
love,
you guys remember
community.
the Live Forever book, the red book, she would have studied that until the end of time. Just when we
Yeah.
finished it, go back through. She just loved all that. Everybody's
Yeah.
going to be happy, like the part that they try to seduce people with.
Yeah. The doctrine and stuff, I was like, yeah, I mean, whatever you guys say, I believe it.
And you loved prophecy.
Oh, God. Oh, I hate prophecy. Made my brain hurt. Yeah, like that was, I think that's another thing. You need to not, like, what made you wake up
Yeah.
might not be what's going to make somebody else
for
wake
sure.
up at all.
We are so different.
We are
as
so
people.
different as far as that goes. So, like, the things that caught his attention and made him wake up are none of the things that made me even blink an eye. So he was trying to convince me with what had woke him up, and I'm just like, don't want to hear it, don't care. I don't care. And so the more he came at me with it, the more I just shut him down, turned him off, got angry. The more I studied, the more I went to meetings, the more I prayed, the more I was angry. The angrier I got. But this interesting thing was, again, they were all normal at home, other than our bickering about the organization. Like, daily life was normal.
Our relationship was great.
Yeah, like, we, still went out to dinner or made dinner or, everyday life was normal. And I can say that he really made sure to still just talk to me. He probably had to work hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
At, just talking to me about everyday things normally instead of, hiding in the corner and feeling awkward. He made sure to just be like, oh, so what do you want to do for dinner? And, hey, did you feed the dogs? And, make that normal conversation be normal. Don't go into a corner and stop talking to your mate, especially, or your loved one, whoever it is you're trying to work. Don't stop talking to them and make it more awkward than it already is.
The other thing I did, that I think I did a good job, we had talked about sobriety. And so coming home from rehab, she was going to AA meetings every day. I went to a lot of those meetings.
Yeah.
And they had events and that, kind of social things. So as much as I hate social gatherings, I went kind of over and above there because I'm like, if we're trying to get her away from this thing, at least this thing is, healthier.
And I was getting a lot of flack for doing AA.
Yeah.
As a Jehovah's Witness. They did not want me doing AA, and I knew it was what was keeping me sober, so I didn't care. I was doing it. I was getting a whole lot of attitude about it, but I didn't care. So I think that's important to know too. Work very hard at keeping up your everyday life to be as normal as it can be. Have everyday life conversations. Don't make things combative. And then when I was studying my Watchtower, I did it in the open to sort of be like, I'm studying, see? I'm studying for the Watchtower to see what attitude I would get. And he would just be like, oh, so what's the Watchtower about? And I was like, oh. Because I thought he would, I don't know, give me an attitude or something. And so
I
then
was
I
just
was
happy to have my Sunday free and watch soccer.
and so then I would like tell him what it was about, thinking like we're going to get in an argument about this. And after Thomas had talked to him, he started realizing being combative about it was not going to help. So he would either just be like, oh, that's interesting, and blow it off if he really disagreed with it, or he would try to find something nice to say about it, or he started trying to find ways of not making us be at odds about Jehovah's Witness things. And I didn't know quite what to do with that, because everyone at the Kingdom Hall was saying to me, like, your family must be making this really hard. And in actuality, after the first maybe month of it being very awkward, after that, it wasn't awkward.
Yeah, we kind of settled in.
Yeah.
And I think me and the kids, we did go out of our way to make the home life just healthy, happy, for the sake of sobriety, because that, having a supportive house is really big as far as that goes. But then also kind of flipping the script on the witnesses, the whole win them over without a word thing they used to say. We were kind of trying to do that. And she made a comment like a month and a half in, like, I cannot believe how much happier and less stressed out you seem.
Yes.
And these were like, I could start to see the little cracks forming.
And it's true, because nothing that Watchtower had said was exactly happening, because Watchtower makes it sound like when your family leaves, your family makes everything harder, and Jehovah's people makes it easier. But in my case, and maybe that happens, I don't know, because I'm not everybody, but in my case, my family were supporting me. My son was going with me to meetings at times. My family would be like, hey, Sunday mornings, we'll make breakfast. Don't you worry about it, so you can get to the hall on time. And they made it as easy as pie for me to go to meetings, do whatever, God in service, do whatever I wanted to do as far as being a Jehovah's Witness was concerned, study for the meetings, any of it. And it was actually when I got to the hall, it was the Jehovah's Witnesses that sort of were like, your family, your family, and sort of put my family down. And I'm like, my family's great. What are you talking about?
We were all the same. We were the same people, and
Just
we
not
are the same people as we were. I was swearing then, and I'm swearing now.
We try not to on the channel, but we swear a lot.
But yeah, so a lot of the narrative that they push is, as you know, it's not true. Yeah. We're just people that see through this thing that they're trying to sell successfully in a lot of cases. And we tried to make the home life as good as it could be and as peaceful and, happy as it could be. And a lot of that is for sobriety, but a lot of that was also, we had said, if you decide to do this, we're going to be here for you. Mm-hmm. And she, at that point, decided she was going to do this. So it was only right for us to stay true to our word.
Right. And
support her.
So as time continued, and this was over months, I was going to meetings. Like I said, I was getting sort of attitude, like, oh, where's your family? And I'm like, well, they're not here. I had one woman, older woman, and I think I've said this in a video before, that was like, well, if your family's not here, they're not going to make it in the new system. I mean, literally just said that to me, and I was like, okay.
But don't worry, if that happens, you'll be memory wiped, and you won't ever remember
says,
you had a husband or kids.
Yeah, she's like, don't worry, Jehovah will take your bad thoughts away if you make it in the new system and they don't. And I'm like, I want to remember my family forever. What are you talking about? But neither here nor there. But anyway, so, I'm at this point stress-free at home and like happily living life at home with my family. And going to the meetings was where I was getting stressed out.
Yeah.
Because that's where I had to put on a happy face. And that's where I had to put on a show like it was like, that's where I had to be fake. And that's where I had to like, or not even be fake as much as I guess like defend my family, because people were always wanting me to act like, oh, your family is just, not there, and I'm like, no, they are there. They're great. They like, my husband dropped me off, or because we're gonna go out to eat after, and they were like, oh, really? And they acted like I was lying or something, and I'm like, yes, that's what we're doing. And it was just so frustrating because everyone at the Kingdom Hall was making me feel bad when I knew my family life was really good and had gotten better because they all quit going and weren't miserable anymore. And I was the one that was still sort of miserable.
Yeah.
And even with my sobriety, I was struggling with it, but that's because I was struggling internally with the fact that I was starting to question the things I had been questioning, like I said at the very beginning of the video. I was now starting to realize I was questioning. Like I was letting the more time that was going by, and I could see how much healthier and happier they all were. And here I was going to all the meetings. I was praying. I was studying. I was taking notes at the meetings. I was doing answering. I was doing all the things I was supposed to do. But as I was, getting healthier, technically going to AA, none of it was jiving together. It was not, I could tell there were pieces that were not fitting together. I was not really happy. And when you were trying to get sober, you have to really know who you are as a person. And the thing was, I wasn't really still me yet. I was pretending to be this Jehovah's Witness that I really wasn't. Like I was pretending to be this alternate version of myself that I wasn't happy with. And I didn't know how to see that exactly yet. I was still muddled with who I was yet.
This was the really critical time because now we're probably 3 months after we told her we're out. So that puts us to about February, I would say. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that 2019, she woke up in May. So we're, it was about 6 months. She was about 6 months behind us. It was noticeable. She came home, she would come home from the meetings and she would be aggravated. Mm-hmm. And she would tell us why. She would, tell us, I just don't feel like they're welcoming me. And everything in you at this point says, now's the time to attack. Now's the time to break them down. Now's the time to get in there and wake them up, and don't do it. Mm-hmm. We didn't do it. And it's the smartest thing I think we did is we just empathized, and then we tried to move on, and we didn't make a big deal about it. And because you could, in fairness, we could see that the walls were starting to come down. But if we had pushed in at that point, it would have just delayed things another 6 months probably.
Or longer.
Or longer. Or you might be Pioneer right now.
Never know.
You could be in the governing body. They might change that too.
So the other thing I will say, another really, I hate giving him credit, but one of the smart things he said was when at this point I finally came to him and said, okay, so, tell me what made you not want to be a witness anymore? Because I was starting to have doubts in my head. I was starting to, what he called study the Watchtower. Because I would sit and study it at home and be like angry because I was starting to read not just the cited, this happened by mistake. The one time I was reading the cited scripture that went with the paragraph and I read the wrong part of it. So I read like a whole bunch more of the scripture than it was meant to be read. And then by doing that, I realized that they were taking the whole scripture that they cited out of context, which made me think, do they know they did this? Wait a minute. Do they do this all the time? Which made me start, when I was studying the Watchtower, reading the whole chapter of, so I was taking forever to study Watchtowers as time went on, because I started reading chapters of the of different scriptures, and to really understand the context of where these scriptures were coming from, and did they actually apply to what they were saying in this paragraph. And most of the time I was finding out it did not apply in any way, shape, or form. And that was making me so angry, but I didn't want to say anything to him because I didn't want him to know he was right. So I was hate studying the Watchtower.
This has been the theme of our marriage for 31 years.
No, it's not.
See?
Anyways, so I was starting to be like, all right, I want to know why, what made him think this is not the truth. Because I was starting to have these cracks. And again, it was all sort of by mistake. Like, it wasn't that I was really looking to disprove anything. I just saw that they were happier. I saw that everyone was trying to turn me against my family, which I didn't like. And then this Watchtower lesson all of a sudden sort of happened. And so all these things. So when I ask him...
So let me interrupt.
He says to me...
Now, before we get there, she asked me, so what is it? And here's what went through my head. Australian Royal Commission, Barbara Anderson, CSA, Mexico versus Malawi. Did you know about all the real estate in London? Let me give you a list of YouTube channels. I mean, I could have gone on for hours with just information dump on her. And it's every instinct in my brain told me to do just that. But I didn't. Go ahead.
He didn't, and I'm glad. Because
so am I.
He said, I could tell you, and I will if you really want, but I'm going to warn you, you will not be able to unhear what I tell you. And I was like, what does that mean?
And I just dropped it.
And he just let it go. And I was like, what? And I thought, what could you possibly know that I don't know about Jehovah's Witnesses? We were almost the same age. He's a little older. So I thought, what can he possibly know that I don't know? Like, I'm sure there's some little stupid tidbit of a something I don't know, but like, how much could he possibly know that I don't know? So I left it go for a minute, but yeah. I am not really good at being patient or letting things go. So I bugged him and asked him again. And he was like, are you sure? You sure you want to know? Because you can't unhear this. Like,
once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, it's once I tell you, you're going to know for the rest of your life. And I thought to myself, well, nothing he's going to say is going to make me change my mind, because I love Jehovah, and this is Jehovah's organization, and there's nothing that's going to make me change my mind about it. Except there was.
I don't even remember what I started.
I don't either. That's the crazy part. I don't know where he started. I don't know what he said to me first. I just know.
I did.
I know. I just know that I know he didn't bombard me. He just slowly, I think you might have started.
I want to say it was Australia.
I think that's what I was going to say. I think it was the Australian Royal Commission, which, as a CSA survivor myself, I think he knew that would speak to me, and because of his father's background, you know, I think he knew that would speak to me the loudest. And I think, again, that's where you need to be prepared if your loved one actually finally asks you. Think about what's going to possibly appeal to them the most, not what appealed to you the most.
The change in the generations doctrine would not have done a thing.
No.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But it would not have woke her up.
No.
I knew for
607.
Yeah. Invalidating 1914 and thus the entire foundation of their doctrine. Yeah. I knew for June, ultimately, she's an empathetic person. and the fact that the religion hurts people would be the thing.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah,
Australia, and it was
I think
and
that
it
is
was
what you
and it was
said.
shunning. Those were the
Yeah.
two things.
Because I was never good at shunning, and he knew that. Like, I've never really shunned people well. I've never done that really good. I've always gotten in trouble for not shunning. I've been talked to several times about, like, sister, you're not supposed to talk to that person. So, that's, I think, where I'm pretty sure that is where you started.
Most likely.
And he didn't throw it all on me quickly, as much as I'm sure he wanted to just, like, vomit it all out at once. He said, like, a little bit. I took it in, and I remember hearing it and being like, okay, that was a lot. And he didn't even show it to me, like,
no, you
he
can't.
just
You
told
can't go
me
straight to YouTube.
Yeah, he just told me, and I was like, okay. And you said something along the lines of, like, I can show you things when you're ready.
There's so much internalized fear of apostates, and especially of YouTube. So it's better if you get to a point where you can actually have a conversation about this stuff. It's better that it comes from a person that they trust rather than a person they don't know. You don't know their background on YouTube. It might be two crazy people on YouTube. You're so much better delivering that yourself and delivering it in really small quantities. Again, you're gonna want to just information dump. It's human nature. It's generally the person you love the most, and you're desperately trying to get them out of this thing, but you have to show restraint. You got to really be tactical about it. Otherwise, you could just push them in deeper. And we say all this so you might think, okay, so he woke her up.
No.
I didn't.
And the other thing I have to go back to is my son.
Yeah.
Before that, what we just said happened, one of the last meetings he went to with me was a Tuesday night meeting, which was the school meeting back then, in service meeting. And
it's the Christian Life and Ministry meeting.
Could we get it it's right, called please? Now. I don't care.
The clam.
He went and endured it, and it had been many times that he had gone with me. And on the way home, I did my usual. I wasn't quite as ridiculous. I knew he didn't love it, but I was like, was it nice to see the people at least? I didn't act like, oh, the message was going to be great. And he said, honestly, Mom, it's even getting hard seeing the people because they only talk to me when I go there. They're never going to talk to me otherwise. And I knew what he was saying was true. And he said, do any of them ever talk to you unless you go here? Did, like, any of them text you or call you? And when I thought about it, I was like, no, he's right. Like, none of them ever do. And, like, I had reached out to several of them to just, like, try to go get lunch or something. And nobody would ever respond back. Or if they did, it was always they had other things to do, which made me realize, as he's saying that, I basically was bad association because my family members weren't in the truth any longer. But I wasn't doing anything wrong. Like, I mean, I guess I was doing something wrong because I was going to AA and trying to be sober. But, like, I wasn't celebrating holidays. I swore at home, but they didn't know that. But I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was at the meetings. I was answering. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And why was no one reaching out to me?
Yeah, there's an expression, and I wish I remembered where I heard it or read it so I could give credit, but it is cults shoot their wounded. And basically, at this point, June is damaged goods, so everybody just backs off so they don't catch whatever it is she has. And that's how it's always worked. And it wasn't me that woke her up.
No.
It was the Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's what
themselves.
I was just going to say. It was like they pointed out little things at different times, or how they worded things made me realize how the witnesses were treating me at different times. But, like, my son was very smart because he would just point out to me, like, is that great? Is it great? Like, seeing these people, was it great? Because they don't talk to me any other time.
Yeah.
Only if I go there do they talk to me. He's like, I have the same phone number I've had for years and years and years. They used to blow up my phone and call me for everything all the time because he is super social. He plays a bunch of instruments. A lot of the people around here do too. They used to get together and play all the time. He's like, no one ever calls me now. He goes, and he says, because I went to the meeting tonight, a couple people will say it was great to see, text me and say, it's great to see you at the meeting. Hope to see you like next Sunday or something. He goes, and when I don't show up, I won't hear a word from them. And I thought, he's right.
He's right.
And that's what made me ask him, before I asked him, I asked my son first, why don't you believe it's the truth any longer? And it was interesting. My son, I don't know what all his answers would have been, but he was smart because he didn't jump on doctrinal Jehovah's Witness things. He is agnostic. So he came from a, I read the Bible. I read the whole Bible. After I was in pioneer school, they brought out a number of very in-depth points about the Bible that I had never paid attention to before. Here's what they are. They made me think. I realized I had never read the whole Bible before, so I decided to. And when I did that, it made me think, I don't know if I agree with all of this. And he's like, that's honestly where I started coming from. So I started doing more and more research, Mom. And I got to say that even if he's like, there is a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses that are a problem, but even if I was a Catholic or a Protestant or a Methodist, any other version of Christianity, I might have left it anyways, just because I don't know that I agree with the Bible. And so I guess I was more willing to listen to what he had to say because he wasn't directly attacking Jehovah's Witnesses. He was just saying he questioned the Bible. And I guess I was a little more willing to listen to what he was questioning about the Bible because I thought maybe I can answer some of his questions about the Bible. And so we had a discussion, a Bible discussion, and it wasn't about the Jehovah's Witness version of anything. It was just a discussion about the Bible. So again, it was a really smart tactic, and I don't know if he thought that through or not, but it's what he did, and it made me feel more comfortable to have a conversation and with him about things. And then he did at the end throw in a couple little thoughts about Jehovah's Witnesses that made me think, but he didn't make that the whole conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what then led me to have the comfort to ask him more things.
I think it's also important to, when you do start talking about specifics, and again, I have to kind of put a disclaimer here. I know our family is incredibly fortunate that we all got out together. Yes. I know this is not everybody's story.
Right.
And there's no like tried and true way to do this. This is just kind of how we did it and what worked for us. So hopefully you can take bits and pieces of this if you're in this situation and use it. Having said that, when we did start talking specifics about Jehovah's Witnesses, the other thing that my son and I think both did pretty well was, rather than attack the religion itself, we told her how what the religion was doing made us feel.
Yes.
I just don't feel right about if one of our kids needs a blood transfusion, we would have to deny that and possibly lose our child. I just don't feel like shunning is something Christian or something that Jesus would have been in favor of. You know, I just don't feel like it's right when you have all these CSA cases that they don't go to the authorities straight away. Things like that, rather than, if you come from that angle, rather than look at what they're doing. These ridiculous people do not call the police when there are, abusers in the congregation. How do they get off? What they have some, all the stuff that you just want to say, You just have to dial everything back. You really have to give your loved one a soft place to land.
And they would ask me questions like, well, how would, like, well, how would you want that to be handled?
Yeah.
Like, or how would you feel? Like, if it came down to it and you knew there was a pedophile in the congregation, wouldn't you want it announced to the congregation for all the parents to know, to
Keep
be
their
able to
kids.
keep their kids
Yeah.
safe? And,
Which
I'm
led
like,
to her saying, well, don't they tell the parents?
yeah, and we only knew because it was his dad, but like I started thinking, yeah, nobody in the congregation knew that. And like I started going through all these things in my head and realizing, yeah, like we knew, but nobody else in the
Yeah.
congregation knew that. And, so like it started making me think, but because he asked me questions, not because he told me how to think. So that really helped, for me in my waking up process. But again, I did have some doubts in my head. I just wasn't allowing myself to face the fact that there were doubts in my head in the beginning.
Yeah, and your reality might be that your spouse or loved one might not have any doubts,
It's
may
unfortunately
never
true.
allow themselves to doubt, and they may stay forever. They may
Yes.
stay, for the duration. And that's when you have to decide if you're willing to have that in your life or not.
Right.
And that those are tough decisions to make. I guess we should probably start wrapping up.
Yeah. So, that was our experience. We were going to sit down as a family and sort of like discuss all our angles of waking up and everything with the kids
still
too.
might.
We might still try to do that, but we thought in the meantime this might be helpful to people to hear it just from us as a couple, like
Yeah.
how we went through this. And again, not to take notes this is how I'm going to wake my spouse up. He did not wake me up.
You can't wake a person up.
Yeah.
They do it themselves. But I guess be as patient as you can, be as loving as you can, and then try to be smart and tactical about your approach. And then you might have a chance at least of making some headway or getting into some frank conversations, because as I'm sure if you're awake yourself, as you know, once you give yourself permission to look into this, it's not a big leap to undo this indoctrination. It just all falls apart as soon as you see it for what it is. You just have to give yourself permission to do that, which is terrifying. It is terrifying to this person.
And remember, like Jared was saying, lead with love.
Yeah.
Lead with love. And remember, like, maybe you weren't this way, but a lot of people are going to be so defensive. So, jumping at them in the beginning is, like, I know for me, I sometimes forget, like, as quickly as defensive as I was with my family, once I woke up, I immediately jumped on family members.
Same thing.
Wanting them to wake up and doing it horribly, just like he did with me.
It's real hard to fight human
because
nature.
I desperately wanted them to see what I finally saw. So I know why he made the mistakes he did. It's because you desperately want your family members to get it.
Yeah.
But
fight
against that.
It reminds me of people like you're in another country and you're trying to speak English and they don't speak English. So you just say it in English again, but at double the volume. Like, that's about how well it works.
It doesn't work.
You just can't do it.
So, I say this as, don't forget that when you were first waking up, I mean, and everyone's story is a little different, but, you probably needed that very little baby steps of, coming to understand, that it's not true and how not true it is, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and then once it's sort of unleashed, you're okay with it all. But initially it's really small baby steps. And
try to think about how long your loved one has been in. Like, in our case, we're talking 45 years of indoctrination.
That was us.
45 years of being told if you ever question anything, something's wrong with you.
Right.
That's all fear. It's all based in fear. It's how they keep people in fear and isolation and all of that. So hopefully this helps.
Yeah, and one last little thing is I knew that by choosing my family as much as I loved them, I was saying goodbye to everyone else in my life. And it's not that I wasn't willing to. My family was worth it, but that was a big step,
It's a
knowing
consideration.
that I was going to say goodbye to everyone else in my life.
You are hitting the self-destruct button on any kind of social life, and a lot of times other family too.
Yes, exactly. And so you have to give some grace to this family member that you want to, even though you have probably already given that up or you're thinking about giving that up and you're ready and willing to do it. This is a whole new concept for that person. So give them grace, be patient. It's a lot. It's taken me years to be okay with the fact that I blew my life up and walked away from everybody because I'm an extremely social, community oriented person, unlike this guy.
I'm extremely introverted, but it's also been really hard. I There are friends that we lost that I dearly miss, and we're not getting them back likely. So
Yeah,
those
we
are all
hope, but
considerations. Yeah,
you
you can
know.
always hope, but
So we hope this maybe helps some of you with ideas of what to do with family members that you want to talk to. But again, you can't wake them up, but you can give little nudges and help along the way. So we hope this helps you. And, as you go about your day, remember always to be yourself and be well.